Hey, it's James from 4x4 Earth, and welcome to track 21 of the 4x4 Earth podcast, New Car Four-Wheel Drive Trends with Robert Pepper.
Join James from 4x4earth.com as he learns all there is to know about four-wheel driving, camping, fishing, and getting out and exploring our great country on the 4x4 Earth podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's podcast is going to be really interesting. We've got Robert Pepper on the podcast, one of Australia's most famous four-wheel drive and automotive journalists, talking about what the manufacturers have got in store for us with new four-wheel drives that are coming out. He's got some really interesting information, some very interesting views, and Robert is probably one of the best people placed to talk about the trends that the manufacturers are going to be bringing out. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. I think Robert's going to have some things to say that a lot of people aren't going to be overly happy with. These are the things that the manufacturers are seeing, and it is going to be interesting to see what vehicles come out in the next 3 years. But before we get into that, I just want to have a quick chat about creek crossings. So, as most of you all know, I've had a few issues with creek crossings in the past. If you haven't listened to podcast, I think it's number 5. Have a listen to that. It's entitled "The Day I Killed My Jeep." So there's no prizes there for working out what exactly happened on that day. And I am quite embarrassed by the fact that I did ride off a vehicle in a creek crossing. I think it's really important that a lot of people watch that video because of the fact that it's not your normal four-wheel drive creek crossing. Really, a lot of people who have said to me, wow, that could happen to anyone. And I think that it's important that when you are doing a creek crossing, you start to think about the kind of risks that you take on. There was a creek crossing done a few weeks ago now, which ended really badly for an FJ Cruiser driver. So luckily, no one was injured or died in this creek crossing, but an FJ Cruiser did die, and that's a real tragedy for someone who's gone out four-wheel driving to have an issue like that occur. That's a real tragedy, and I think it's good that these guys put the video up because of the fact it's important that everyone should have a look at what goes wrong. And also, there's been a really robust discussion about how that situation could have been fixed. Creek crossings are one of those things, particularly when you're driving into an area and then you have to drive back out and there's been significant rain. The situation can change, the conditions can change, and that can create a real dilemma for people when they're actually about to make that creek crossing. We don't know all of the circumstances around this. We don't know how experienced they were. We don't know any of the situations around it. But I just want to say, it is one of these things that can happen to anyone. I know a lot of people who are actually really quite experienced four-wheel drivers who've had significant issues or have gotten through a creek crossing more by luck than with skill. So the more times you see these kind of things, hopefully the more times you're more likely to have a little bit of a think about these factors before you do a creek crossing the next time you go out there. So really important, whether a new experienced four-wheel driver, I'll include a link to the thread in the podcast notes. And speaking of new four-wheel drivers, if you are a new four-wheel driver, not overly experienced, and particularly you're in Victoria or prepared to drive to Victoria into some of the beautiful high country, don't forget the Shipyard Flats Victorian Gathering, which is coming up. I'll include a link in the show notes for that. There's going to be a lot of really experienced four-wheel drive. There's going to be a lot of really experienced four-wheel drivers out there. This is probably Australia's largest free four-wheel drive weekend away. It's the 9th Annual Victorian Gathering. Really huge opportunity for anyone who is new to four-wheel driving, new to the high country, or who just likes getting out and enjoying the great outdoors, great four-wheel driving with some great four-wheel drivers as well, sitting around the campfire having a beer or two. So it's Thursday the 10th to Monday the 14th of November. You don't need to be there for all of that time. There are some people who will be coming in just for the day to do a few trips. Some people who will be coming in Friday night and heading off Sunday afternoon. Lots of opportunities there to go out and experience some of the beautiful high country. Most importantly, it's perfect for newbies to head along to. So if you are new or if you've been on one of the Victorian gatherings before, please come along. We'd love to see you there. Now, let's get into it and find out where Robert Pepper thinks new four-wheel drives are going. Hey, Robert, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much, James. Always a pleasure to be here virtually talking about four-wheel drives.
Indeed. So you've been out and about driving some fairly interesting new four-wheel drives, haven't you?
Yeah, it's just part of the job, but that is what I do, getting out there driving what I can, yeah.
And an awesome job that is as well. So the one that I'm really, really interested in is an F-truck. So what was it that you drove and how did you find it?
Well, it was three vehicles I drove back-to-back, and that was a Ford F250, a Chevy Silverado, and a Landcruiser 200 series, a diesel 2012 model. And that was up with Performax in Queensland, and they do conversions of these big American trucks, and really good converters, I might say, to actually fabricate the trim panels, and would not know it is an aftermarket conversion. It's that good. They're not ridiculously expensive. 150, I think, is the model I was driving there. That's a relatively upmarket one, and there's Toyota Tundras down as well. So the question is, why would you bother look at one of these trucks? I mean, aren't they just too big and bulky for Australian conditions? And I think that the answer to that is no. If you want to tow a big trailer, then you're better off towing it in one of those trucks than you are with something like a 200 series. And that was kind of brought home to me when I was towing a 3-ton trailer around. I drove it with the 200 series first, went out for 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, driving it around if that did variety of terrains, then drove it with the other two. And the difference was quite dramatic. With the 200 series, going over uneven, broken bitumen, there was a distinct amount of fore and aft pitching. You'd go around a corner, you could feel the trailer was there. The car handled it, it was fine. Pulling away, the engine had to work harder. It did the job though, and you definitely knew there was a trailer on the back there. You got into the F250 and the difference was dramatic. There was just no fore and aft pitching. The car was not bossed around by the trailer at all, and the torque on that thing, 1,1200 newton meters, yeah, it's a very impressive tow vehicle. And I think that's why people need to look at these cars. If you've got a big job to do, you know, these cars like the 200 series are not really designed to tow 3.5 tons day in, day out. Vehicles like the F-Truck are. They've got special transmission modes which actually increase cooling to the transmission, and the beautiful down changes as you brake gently. They've got tow haul modes, they've got built-in electric brake controllers. The thing is just designed right from the ground up for towing in a way that, let's say, the Discovery 200 series, the Ranger and so forth, simply are not.
What was it? Did you get to take it off-road at all?
No, didn't get to take it off-road at all. And I think that's where the disadvantage would come in there. I think for desert trips, there'd be no drama there. You'd want to put bigger tyres on it, though, at least 35-inch, maybe even 37s, just to give yourself enough clearance. It's a long wheelbase there. But look, there's plenty of power there. It's got a decent four-wheel drive system, part-time four-wheel drive. The problem would be length and manoeuvrability, really. It's significantly wider than even a 200. It's significantly longer, the turning circles there. You wouldn't want to try and thread it in and out some high country tracks. You could if you had to. Yeah, it wouldn't be a fun thing. So I think that's where the disadvantage goes. But if you're not going to do that, I think it would make a great touring vehicle once you've got a few mods on it.
I would love, that was when I was a kid, an F-150 was my dream vehicle. They are a very imposing vehicle, and I can see you having significant problems taking them off-road, but they do look awesome, and they'd be awesome to go through a bit of mud in the paddocks as well, I reckon.
Oh, look, that they would. And the thing is, you don't actually lack the luxury features. The F250 I was in and the Silverado were the top spec models, and they've got pretty much everything. The seats are adjustable about 15 different ways. It's really spacious interior. I mean, you could almost put a small child in the centre console there. You go into the back, and it's a full-size back. It's a bigger dual cab than any of our dual cabs on the market. It makes the 200 series look small in terms of cabin. Yet the tray is longer than an extra cab Ranger, getting up towards the length of a single cab Ranger. So you've just got this vast amount of space there. And if you put a service body on that, man, I mean, it's almost be like a motorhome there. It's a luxurious car. But look, I do need to chuck in a couple of criticisms there. We talked about the size. The steering on the F250 is appalling. You know, the last thing I drove with a steering thing like that, we actually had a Road Ranger gearbox. Now, Performax do tell me that the next model coming, the 2017 model, has got a vastly revised steering ratio, and that's good. It bloody needs it. The Silverado was much better. That steered a lot better than the F250, but didn't quite have the same control of the trailer or the sophistication there, so there was that. But yeah, I can definitely see the attraction of these cars. I think they'd be a really good touring machine. If you've got 4 or 5 people to go, that huge amount of space in the back, it's impressive. And to tow big stuff, I'd way rather be towing a big trailer of one of those in the 200 series. No question about it.
So how did you find the 200 series?
The 200, I didn't get a lot of time, apart from towing it there, but what I have had is just a 200 series cruiser on test, and it was good to get back into it because I did some of the initial tests way back in 2007 when they first hit the market, and I think I was the first person to drive the 200 to the tip of Cape York, and maybe I'll be contradicted on that, and that would be nice, but I'm taking that for the moment. But the 200 series, it's an interesting car because I like it a lot. It's one of those cars where you pay for the engineering, you pay for the capability, but you don't pay for the interior and the refinement. The interior is a bit of a mess, to be honest. It does feel as if it's a lot of luxury features just randomly thrown together what should have been a base model, which is typically Toyota these days, and it's not really well thought through. But the thing is amazing off-road. Toyota's electronics are just incredible. They've got a good old-fashioned central diff lock, which is amazing. The KDSS suspension is really impressive. The way that flexes and the total flex it's got, that's great. Because there's 2 things of suspension. First of all, it's total flex. Secondly, it's how easily it flexes. That's really impressive. And the different modes it's got with multi-terrain select, rock mode versus a mud and sand mode. You can really see the differences there. The thing is an amazing off-road machine. It works pretty well as a 7-seater. It's not as good as the Discovery in my view there. But, a bunch of us jumped in it and we took 7 people and that's fine. It actually works pretty well around town as well. It's the power is delivered instantly. There's none of that diesel, wait. Oh, there you go. It's all gone there. So, yeah, the 200 series is a really effective machine all the way around. And I kind of like the fact that some people might get to think, oh, God, what are we paying this for? It doesn't look like the interior of an Audi, yet it's $120,000. You're not paying for the interior. You're paying for the good, solid off-road engineering and good, solid towing capability. And I really like it from that point of view.
Awesome. So there's some new transmissions coming out, DCT, CVT. What's happening with there? What's your take on it?
Well, the good old torque converter we all know and love. Well, first of all, the manual transmission's dying because no one's buying. Right, so that's clear. Now, the automatic transmission has always typically been a torque converter. We all know and love that. We call it the slash box, and that's fine. But transmission technology is moving on quickly, and we're up now. 8-speed transmissions are pretty commonplace, and 9-speed we're seeing that more and more now. Jeep Renegade, Discovery Sport, and Evoque, and so on. So, but it's also not just the amount of ratios; it's how that gearbox actually works. So you've got DCT or dual clutch transmission gearboxes, and they don't have a torque converter. They've literally got a couple of clutches which engage alternate gears, even gears versus odd gears, and they are more efficient than the torque converter gearboxes. They're lighter. There's less losses going through the systems there, and that's why they tend to be used on cars because, I said in previous podcasts, the thing which is driving car manufacturers more than anything else is fuel efficiency. Fuel efficiency. That's what drives a lot of their decisions and what they do and how they do it. And the second thing after that is safety. And DCT transmissions offer some advantages there, as indeed does the other hot transmission, which is CVT, continuous variable transmission. And this is the one where you don't have any gears. You've simply got a little wheel connected to a bigger wheel by an effective rubber band, and the little wheel starts off on the engine, the bigger wheel on the effective other side of the gearbox, and the two, as one of the driven wheels gets larger, the one on the gearbox gets smaller, and that's in effect you've got an infinite amount of gear ratios. And that's really good for transmissions as well, because then the engine can stay in its most efficient rev or torque band, depending on which is best for the time, and you get good fuel efficiency see that way as well. But we're not seeing that into four-wheel drives because they're not robust enough for what we do, and that's been brought home to me a couple of times in tests. The most recent one was with the new Suzuki Vitara. Had a diesel Vitara on test, and it's a light car. Suzuki know how to make a good off-road vehicle, yet that lasted about 7 minutes into the test before there was this god-awful smell, and the clutch had given up, because in effect we were driving it at slow speeds, and what the transmission was doing, it was in effect slipping the clutch the whole time, which is simply not going to work. So we had to pretty much cut the off-road section short there. And CVT is the same sort of thing. It's not designed for slow-speed, heavy-duty work. And unfortunately, that's what we see in Subarus now, and they tend to start to give up a bit after a while as well. So whilst these new transmissions are great for smaller on-road cars, they've got a bit of work to do before they replace the good old torque converter for heavier-duty four-wheel drive applications. And at this stage, I'd be very, very sceptical of too many vehicles wanting to do too much hard off-road work with wider transmission.
It is kind of scary though, because they do market them with that whole, sort of marketing image of, the vehicle going through the creek with the water going everywhere, and, often there's a bit of mud flying everywhere. It is what they're kind of marketing some of those vehicles out, isn't it?
Well, there's marketing and there's reality, and never the twain shall meet. You say what you say to get the car sold, and that's fine. I mean, look, I've got a generally big issue with four-wheel drive advertising. I've written on it a few times already. And my view is you can have an effective ad which is environmentally and ethically correct and doesn't show cars slipping through mud bogs unnecessarily or being driven at stupid speeds over rough terrain, or in unsafe recovery practices. And, an example of that is the famous Toyota bugger ad. I'm sure you've seen that. That's one of the all-time classic ads. There's nothing wrong with it from a four-wheel driving technique or anything else, and it's so effective, and it gets the whole thing across that, and people are still watching it 20 years or however many years it is later on. So come on, advertising agencies, lift your game, create another classic like that. We do not need to see another SUV being driven at high speeds over rough terrain at speeds which are frankly stupid, when you've got classics like that to draw inspiration from. So lift your game, advertising people.
And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that, they're not four-wheel drivers, and it's painfully obvious that they're not four-wheel drivers just from the kind of things that they get the vehicles doing.
Well, look, that's right. But the thing is, in fairness to them, they're not trying to sell to four-wheel drivers a lot of the time. They're trying to sell to Joe Average, and they're trying to go for the halo effect, saying, look, this car's really tough, da-da-da-da-da. And look, that's fine. Now, the issue I've got with this is they say, it doesn't have to be realistic. If we showed a car driving through salt water, what's the problem with that, yada, yada, yada? Or what does it matter if they're doing 60 k's an hour over terrain, which realistically should only be 20, and you see the suspension bouncing up and down? Well, isn't that the same as people, taking the car on the racetrack and showing it at 200 miles an hour? I'm going, well, no, it's not, because if you take a car to a racetrack and you show it drifting and so forth, everybody knows that you're not allowed to do that on public roads, and it's a bad idea. You can argue that people watching an advert would be inspired to do it, and that's why often these adverts are struck down, but you cannot argue that people don't know it's wrong. Now, if you take four-wheel driving and you show bad practice in that, Joe Average doesn't know it's wrong. You show a snatch strap being connected to a tow ball, Joe Average does not know that's wrong, because to the uninformed, that might seem a very logical thing to do. You show someone driving 50 k's an hour through a mud bog when they shouldn't be driving through it. Joe doesn't know that's wrong. And that's the issue I've got, which is that Joe Average public cannot differentiate between safe four-wheel driving practices and non-safe in the same way that they can with a road car hooning around and not hooning around.
It is quite interesting. Now, the Landcruiser 200, one thing I forgot to ask, the difference in the models, there's a few differences in the models. What do you think? Is the top of the range good value for money, or are you better off just going for the budget version? Not that it's that budget.
Well, yeah, it's not that budget. Okay, how much do you reckon the difference in price is between the GX, the lowest model, and the Sahara at the top? Just take a guess.
Oh, I've got no idea. I'm assuming it's probably quite a bit, though.
Okay, well, have a punt.
$30,000?
$42,000.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically a T-van or a basic ute there. So look, my view these days, advice to car buyers I've got is start at the base model and work your way up, because these days your base model comes with cruise control, Bluetooth, power windows, often sat-nav, often climate control, and a whole host of other goodies there. And, as I work my way through the spec sheets, I'm often not seeing a huge amount of differences as you work your way up there. And in the case of the 200, I don't think the Sahara is worth it, frankly, to be honest. If you've got enough money and you don't mind, then fine, buy it. But realistically, it's not worth it. The other bit of advice which should give people is think about the aftermarket, because let's say that you really want a reversing camera. Well, you can add one aftermarket. It's not that hard. And a lot of reversing cameras, the manufacturer-supplied ones, are not that good quality. Mercedes make a really good reversing camera, which almost GoPro-like in its quality. And you get into something like the Toyota, and you go, no, that's a bit sort of low resolution there. It's really not that great. And sat-nav, I really don't think car-based sat-nav is worth it. I think you're much better off getting a good mount for your phone and using that. I'm just not a fan of it at all. And part of the problem with sat-nav on cars is that most cars have got a single infotainment unit screen. And what that means is that you can have the sat-nav going, or you can look at what radio stations you've got, or you can look at something else. If you can't sort of multitask things. You can't have the sat-nav going on one part of the screen and then something else going on another part of the screen. If you're running it on your phone, you can do that, because then you can play with whatever you want on the car. And when I'm four-wheel driving, I've often got two screens going. I've got my phone going, which might be showing one screen on Aussie Explorer, and then I've got another phone set up which might be showing a different map on Aussie Explorer. I like to have that capability, and with sat-nav in cars, you can't do it. So I think that the message is look at the base model cars first, and then make certain that you actually really don't need those extra features. And if you do, think about what you could do aftermarket or with the money. And I think base model cars are becoming increasingly attractive these days. In the case of the 200 series, it's exactly the same engine and everything else. You're not missing out on anything there.
I entirely agree about the car, about the in-car nav systems. They come up with some colourful choices. I know in the BT50, when I was driving to the Flinders Ranges, we did it over 2 days. And on the second day, I thought I had about 6 hours-ish to drive. And I got in the car, put the address in, and it was saying that I had 12 hours to go. And I thought, oh, that can't be right, because we drove 12 hours yesterday. And I pulled my phone out and had a look, and it was taking us via Adelaide. It was adding an extra 6 hours onto the journey, and it was like, holy cow. The thing I really liked in the Pajero Sport was it uses the phone app for navigation. So you've got all those smart guys at Google or Apple who are doing these nav apps, and, that's their bread and butter. A much better solution. It just worked really well, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. A much better solution than having to rely on something, which is difficult to update as well. Those car maps are difficult to update.
Look, that's exactly right. Again, it's going to come to that. It is hard to update, and also it's not integrated with the phone.
Exactly.
So, Google Cards now tells you, hey, you've got to leave for this now, or you want to look up a mate's address, you look up his name, bang, it's in there. It's all integrated. Your life's on your phone, and it just becomes so much easier. So, at the moment, I would not want sat-nav in a car. I'd consider it a waste of time. I just want to set a phone mount up and use that. I think that is, frankly, more effective for all the reasons we've mentioned. And what you also brought up with the Pajero Sport is interesting, because what we're seeing now is a lot more Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And I've reviewed that in some detail. And look, it's definitely the way of the future, but at the moment it's not quite there. It's not seamless enough, not easy to use. The features aren't quite there yet. I think it needs another generation or two before it becomes completely seamless to use. But that's where it's going, because it's cheaper for the car manufacturers to push all of that out to the smartphone for sure, and ultimately it's going to be better in the long term. Right now, what I like to see in a car is a good user-friendly system. I'm not a fan of touchscreens, because touchscreens are really hard to use. You don't know what to press when, and going over rough ground, it's actually really hard to use a touchscreen. One of the problems I had with the 200 series, the only way to adjust a fan was to use the touchscreen. So if you wanted to change the fan, you had to press a button to bring up the climate, then you had to press the touchscreen up or down. You try doing that when you're driving on a dirt road with one hand there. I want to be able to just reach over to a dial and go flick left, flick right, job done. It's Toyota, what are you thinking? And that's a problem I've got with touchscreens in general, and I really like what Mercedes and Audi and BMW have done, which is that they tend to use controllers now as opposed to touchscreens, and that's so much easier to use when you're on the move, and a lot more intuitive as well. In fact, I think that the whole area of intuitiveness and ease of use of car design is a long way to go, because it is so hard to use some of these new cars. I test, I don't know how many new cars. I get confused sometimes as to exactly what car I've got where, and I get into some cars and think, okay, how do I do this? I just don't get it, and it's just, there needs to be way more effort put into car usability, because that's a major safety issue if the driver's having to take their eyes off the road to operate things.
I was just going to say that, I'm amazed at some of the things that are really, really complicated to do. And you just think, how many people get caught out doing this? They take their eyes off the road for, 3 or 4 seconds, or they get deeply engrossed in what it is that they're doing. And I know that they've done studies in aircraft where people can stop flying the plane for 3 or 4 minutes at a time because they're working on something else. How many times does people, they've got their head inside the plane rather than inside the car rather than out? And they're certainly not concentrating on driving the vehicle, and that's a really dangerous place to be.
Mate, you're not wrong. I just watched a series called Air Crash, and on that they go through why crashes happen, and there was a major air crash, hundreds of people lost their lives. Reason was that there was a bulb gone. They tried to put the landing gear down. You should get 3 greens when the landing gear goes down to say that all three gears are down and locked, but they only got 2. The nose wheel green light didn't illuminate. So they think, okay, they'll try it a couple of times, didn't work. They thought, okay, maybe it's the bulb. Let's take this bulb out and have a look at it. So they fiddled with the bulb after they put the aircraft in autopilot. What they didn't realise was, although they put it on autopilot at 2,000 feet, they'd accidentally disengaged it, and the aircraft descended. And the entire crew, 3 or 4 of them, were so focused on fiddling around with this bulb, they didn't notice that the aircraft had lost height till almost hit the ground, and by that time they tried to pull up, it was too late, hit the swamp, and they all pretty much died. And there you go. That's a classic example of distraction on a bigger scale. That's what's happening with cars, and that's why in aviation you're told this: aviate, navigate, communicate in that order, and never forget it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was in the Florida Everglades, I think that one was.
That is the one, yeah. It's Flight 401, and the interesting thing was after that it became some of the most documented ghost sightings ever recorded in history from the flight crew of Flight 401. So, look, we're probably slightly diverging off the topic, but the sort of people that are interested in this podcast would be interested in the story of Flight 401. So read it up on Google or watch the Air Crash Investigations episode. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, well, that's freaky. But it is, I think there is too much going on in the car these days, and it does make it difficult. All-wheel drives, what are your thoughts on those and where they're going?
Let's take a look at all-wheel drive versus two-wheel drive first of all, then, because this is an interesting topic. It's coming up a bit with we've got. Well, look, let's backtrack a bit. It used to be that every single SUV, even the most modest one like the CR-V, was always sold in all-wheel drive. You never had a two-wheel drive version like you did overseas. And the reason for that was that there was a big tax incentive for the four-wheel drive, for anything four-wheel drive, back in the days when four-wheel drives were only farmers' tools, etc. But that was phased out a few years ago now, so it became cost-effective for manufacturers to import two-wheel drive versions. Hence, we've got two-wheel drive lots of things. We've got two-wheel drive territories, although that was made here. Suzuki Vitara is two-wheel drive, the Tucson, and even the bigger vehicles. The MUX is available in two-wheel drive, and Ford are bringing out a two-wheel drive Everest. So this then begs the question, should you, and now it's probably slightly moot compared to some of the people listening to this podcast, going, of course you're going to buy the four-wheel drive version, but I'm going to twist that a little bit and say, does it matter whether your vehicle is part-time four-wheel drive or full-time four-wheel drive? And let's contrast the Prado, which is constant four-wheel drive, versus the Fortuner, which is part-time four-wheel drive. Does that make a difference anymore, and should you prioritise one over the other? And the answer is, you should prefer all-wheel drive as a general rule. And here's the reasons why. Now, all-wheel drive basically gives you better traction, and that's with a stock standard vehicle out of the box. And I remember once I borrowed a Colorado from ARB. Now, look, the Colorado is far from defined as handling ute, and this was a previous generation model. I washed it before I took it back to them. This was a nice sunny day. Went round a roundabout and lost the back end because I just washed the car and got water on the tyres. And it would not have happened if it was a two-wheel drive vehicle. Back on the towing, when I was towing with the F250 and the Silverado, a couple of times the back end sort of lost a little bit of traction there when I was making a hasty getaway. That never happened in the 200 series, which has a good all-wheel drive system with a torsion center differential. So you can, especially with now more powerful utes and so forth, you can overwhelm the rear tyres, and that's not a good thing. And that simply doesn't happen with two-wheel drives. I may have related a story before about how someone was driving a Pajero in two-wheel drive only and pulled away in front of a truck and nearly got taken out because the electronics kicked in and cut the throttle, and that would not have happened if they were driving an all-wheel drive. Particularly on dirt roads, you don't need to worry about two-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive. You just drive the thing. And even when you're backing a trailer, I'm sure if anyone's backed a heavy trailer, often in two-wheel drive, you get one wheel spinning. With all-wheel drive, it's just easier all the way around. So all-wheel drive is definitely better than part-time four-wheel drive on the road, and it's easier, and there's no two ways about it. But that said, part-time four-wheel drive offers a slight fuel efficiency benefit, not a huge amount, but there's a little bit there, which is good. Obviously, if the front transmission has problems, you can just drive the rear a bit more easily than you can with a all-wheel drive, and unless it's got lockable centre diff, and even then you can often isolate it a bit better in a part-time four-wheel drive. And the other thing is that, going back to that Colorado example there, I had to correct that with opposite lock, but had that been a modern Colorado with stability control, the electronics would have cut in and saved the day. So there's less need now to say, look, you don't need to worry so much about going around a wet roundabout and ending up facing oncoming traffic, because the electronics will cut in and typically save you from that now, provided you've been sensible enough to leave them on there. So overall, I'd recommend all-wheel drive over part-time, but I wouldn't write off part-time if your ideal vehicle is a part-timer.
So that's an interesting segue into safety aids. There's a lot of, it is a lot of marketing's done around it, and there's a lot of cool things coming out. Which of the safety aids do you see as being the ones that are actually useful and help you keep safe on the roads?
Well, first thing I'd say about safety aids is ANCAP need to up their game and start giving consumers a better view of what's safe and what's not. So just diverging off four-wheel drive, I'll give you an example of where their 5-star ratings are misleading. Suzuki Swift versus Mercedes AMG A45. Now, both of these vehicles have a 5-star safety rating, so you'd think at first glance they're equal, right? Both got a 5-star rating. Well, far from it, because the AMG has got blind spot monitoring. It's got reversing aids front and rear. It's got a really good reversing camera. It's got lane departure assist. It's got all sorts of safety aids. You can just go on and on and on about. The Swift's got none of that. None at all. It's just got the basic crashworthiness, and that's it. Yet both of them are apparently the same. They've both got a 5-star safety rating, and that's frankly misleading. The other thing about safety ratings is that a 5-star car which was tested in, let's say, 2010 is not the same as a 5-star car which is tested in 2016, because ANCAP, and rightly so, keep raising the bar for improving safety. Yet you wouldn't know that, because you don't really look, 5-star 2010 or 5-star 2016. You just look at 5-star, then you move on. So I think that ANCAP really need to differentiate properly, and I've suggested that you forget 5-star, you just go 6-star, 7-star, 8-star, and as time goes on, then that really gives you a good indication there. I don't know what you feel about those points there before I move into what safety aids you should have.
I was going to say, do they need to go to 6-star? Because, safety is one of the buying factors. I know that in the vehicles that we've bought, safety has been a big issue. They need to do a better job of you don't want to be buying because you're exactly right. You would think that they were comparable, and yet one's got a truckload more safety devices, so they're nowhere near the same.
Well, they're not, and I'd like to see cars go 6-star, 7-star, 8-star. And the manufacturers would love it. They could say, hey, this is the first 8-star vehicle, or the first 8-star four-wheel drive, or the first 7-star vehicle under $30,000, or whatever the case is. And then you could see, wow, look at this, the car of 2016 that's a 9-star one, whereas this car, that was only a 5-star back in 2010. It would actually mean something. I just don't see why they're not going to do it. But it's not in ANCAP's plan, and they've actually specifically stated they won't do it. They do have plans to revise what they do more along the lines of what Euro NCAP does, and that's great. But yeah, for me, I don't think it's working. I mean, I just don't see the differentiation between safety models there.
It does sound a bit crazy. So which features do you think are worthwhile?
Well, I think that the two biggest ones are now pretty much mandatory, and that's stability control and curtain airbags, side airbags. So that's ticked. I think that the ones I'd really look at now are autonomous emergency braking, where that detects a problem in front and brakes the car. Now, not all systems are equal, and it only works down to about 40 km. Now, in fact, I went to Mercedes safety day, and the guy drove at 41 km. Now, I've actually put a YouTube video of this up on Practical Motoring, and he hit the dummy that was meant to stop that. Next time he drove at 39 km an hour, and we just stopped in time. So they're not all equal, but even the worst of it is best than nothing. So autonomous emergency braking is definitely a good safety feature there. Another feature I'm pretty keen on is trailer sway control. Hopefully you'd never need it, but if you've ever had trailer sway, it is bloody frightening. So if you're towing, I definitely want to tick the trailer sway control box, that's for sure. TSC is what the acronym typically is there. I'm a fairly big fan of blind spot warning as well, and lane departure. Blind spot warning is pretty good because you can ignore it, but otherwise, hang on a minute, that's there. Maybe I just won't change lanes. Maybe I just didn't see that. So fairly keen on that. The ones less keen on, lane departure warning is a great idea, but in theory, it tends to come up with so many false negatives, false positives, that you end up switching it off. So I think that needs to mature a bit. And the other thing about safety technologies is that they're not all equal. Just because a car's got a reversing camera doesn't mean to say it's as good as the next one. I talked about how good Mercedes are, for example, and how poor Toyota are and Suzuki. And again, the way that lane departure is implemented from vehicle to vehicle does change, and it's more effective in some and less effective in the others. So don't think that you've seen them all. And as ever with safety technologies, they do evolve fairly rapidly over time, so they'll get better and better. But you know what the ultimate safety investment is, and that's a good low-risk driving course.
Is it really? Yeah, I've never
absolutely, because
I've never actually done one, but Tina has.
Yeah, well, the reason it's effective, and this is something I know Ricky Mears was really hot, so I had a few discussions with him about it, is that it actually works because there's a number of companies out there that make business by going into large corporates who run large amounts of fleets. And if you run a large fleet, then crashes are a big cost to you because it's a health and safety issue, or WHS as we should call it now, before it changes again next week. And there's a big cost to the business, not of the repair, but of the opportunity cost, the admin, potentially lost business. It's just a massive cost. You want to reduce that. So every single cost crash you can avoid is a big cost reduction. So how do you reduce crashes? Well, you train the drivers, and that's what these companies do. And it's cost effective for the big people that run fleets to pay for low-risk driver training because they more than get their money back with a reduced crash rate. And there's statistics to prove that, and it's cost effectiveness, which is why these companies are still in business. Now, the thing is, you might think, okay, what is low-risk driver training? And when we come to driver training, when people say, we should do more driver training, we've got to talk about what sort of driver training they mean, because there's many, many different types of training, and you can roughly split it down as follows. You've got your skills, your car control type stuff, which is, okay, I'm going to teach you how to drift, I'm going to teach you how to drive off-road, I'm going to teach you how to drive fast on a racetrack. That's your car control stuff. That stuff tends to be of minimal use on the road, and the reason is because if you get to the stage where you need your advanced car control skills, you've generally failed as a driver. So I go back to aviation, because I do have an aviation background, and we had a saying there which was, the above-average pilot uses their above-average airmanship to avoid situations where their above-average flying skill is needed. And what that meant was the above-average pilot managed things to the point where they never got in situations where they needed to use their ace flying skill. And that's very true of car driving. So the actual skill you want to develop on with car driving is anticipation of situations and a mindset that I can be at fault and I'm going to be a considerate driver and manage my risk around, and it's not all about trying to get A from B to fastest and everyone else is at fault there. And if you think about it, we all drive really, really nicely when there's a cop behind us, don't we?
Yes.
Or when we're being watched, right? No one has an accident when they're being watched and the driving instructor's in the seat, okay? So we actually all know how to drive really well. Okay? And it's not much to do with the physical driving of it or how well you change gear or this, that, and it's or exactly how you hold the steering wheel and so forth. It's about your attitude. So low-risk driver training is about changing people's attitudes so that they drive like they have a police car behind them at all times. That's the key to it. So it's more about mind stuff as opposed to teaching people the physicalities about driving.
Yeah, that is interesting. So when you're doing your research into all of the things, which forums do you use? Obviously there's 4x4 Earth and there's a truckload of... Do you do a lot of forum research?
I do like to find a forum that deals with the car, and I do have a quick scan of it, or not a quick scan there, and I try and link to it in the reviews as well, because forums have got a bit of a mixed reputation. Certainly the aftermarket industry is talk to the guys, and oh, geez, you read that on the forum, oh, God. There's all sorts of memes going. And look, to some extent that's true, because there is a lot of rubbish on the forums there, but it's a lot of rubbish in lots of different places, apart from places I write for. Obviously, it's all pure gold. But there's some really good stuff on there. Just recently, I was complaining that the Fortuner seats were hard to remove, because I think they are hard to remove. They should be a lot easier than what they are. And one guy contacted me from the Fortuner forum and said, look, actually, we found out a way to remove them pretty quickly and easily. And I looked at it and said, okay, that's great. Yeah, look, you figured it out. That's good. So I put up a blog post and linking to their thread, and that's good. And I think that the power of the forum is amazing. You've got all of these people from all of these different backgrounds and knowledges and skills, and they're beavering away at problems. They want to share information. So overall, I'm a huge fan of forums, and I think they're a real power for the good. And I think 4x4 Earth is one of the best ones out there, one of the biggest and most successful, and largely because of the effort you put into it. It's not always easy to keep a big community like that alive, but it's sort of going from strength to strength, and I think that's really good.
The big thing is our moderators. They're the secret of our success. Our moderators make sure that everyone is nice and polite. There's the friendly banter, and I would like to think that that's it's a family-friendly forum that's got a huge amount of information there, because I think we're doing around 200,000 visits a month now, which in the days of Facebook and all of the other sort of distractions, it's not a small website these days.
No, it's not. I think that's fantastic, and look, I agree. And what I like is going back to 200 series gear again, because that's my most recent four-wheel drive one. I got quite a number of comments on that, but the comments were really high quality comments. They were going, look, love you with this. Well, it's nice when people say they love your work. It gives you a bit of a lift for the day. And so, look, I just got a few issues with this, and this, and they'd carefully explain their point of view and give their experience and go, man, this is gold, So there's actually now as much quality in the comments I've got in my 200 series review as there is in the actual review itself. And I'm really grateful to everyone that commented there. That's really what I think needs to be the future of automotive journalism. The journalist says, look, I've done this here, and owners come in with well-considered, intelligent, well-rounded views, and they put it up there, and that's such a help to everybody, because I try and take as many different viewpoints as I can, but there's a limit to what one person can do. I'm not yet sort of 70 doing the grey nomad grumpy old bastard thing, but fortunately I've got a few role models I can look at for that and try and put myself in their shoes. My kids aren't too young anymore, but I remember what it was like, so I try and take that point of view. Yeah, that sort of collaborative journalism is the way to go. I just don't know the right model for it yet. So if anyone knows, please let me know. I'm dead keen to hear.
It is interesting. Now, one final question, and it's probably the most important question of the night, I think. The Jeep Ute, probably going to be the iconic vehicle of next year. Sadly, I think probably by default, because I can't think of anything else that's going to be out there that you think, wow, that's quite different. That certainly stands out. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's just grab the interesting vehicles first. I'm really looking forwards to the Mercedes Ute. So it's going to be based on the MP300. I like Utes. I'm hoping Mercedes will do something different, like, coil springs, disc brakes all round and all-wheel drive, and that would be pretty damn sweet with a good interior, so I'm looking forward to that one. Interested to see if Hyundai dip their toes into proper four-wheel drives. They've got a Santa Cruz sort of Ute, that looks a bit lightweight to me. And we've got the new Discovery coming next year. That's going to be a very interesting vehicle. We've got new Defender. Now, that is going to be super hot. That's going to get the NOx crying into their straggly beards, I suspect. But, it's still going to be interesting to see what they do there. The Amarok is due for a major refresh. I don't know if it's going to be next year, but there's strong rumours there's going to be a wagon version of that. Whether or not that's actually going to be with the current version. So, look, I think there's going to be quite a few interesting vehicles, but I think that probably the new Wrangler is going to be the most interesting. Now, let me actually address your question here, which was the Wrangler Ute. Well, Jeep are being pretty tight-lipped on this, but I wonder if the Wrangler Ute is going to be a recreational Ute as opposed to a working Ute. And where I'm going with that is look at the Wrangler versus, what was the Defender before it died. And people are going, well, look, they're the same, right? They're both 100 years old, they're both iconic, they both had live axles front and rear. Actually, they were quite different. The Defender was a real working vehicle, and I'm going to upset all the Jeep people here, but we're kind of generally upset anyway, so it doesn't make much difference. The Wrangler never was a working vehicle in that respect. Look at the four-door Wrangler. It's got no space in the back, considering how big it is. It can't tow. It's got no payload. Right? It's not, and you look at the Defender or any of the other working wagons, it slaughters the Jeep on those things then. And I wonder if this Ute coming out is just going to be minimal payload and, more sort of recreational, look at me, fun time in the forest thing, or it's going to be a serious working vehicle which traders are going to use and emergency services people are going to use, and let's say the vein of the 79 series cruiser. I kind of think it's not going to be that serious a Ute. Yeah, that's just my speculation. It could be wrong. Who knows?
I have to agree with the Ute. I love my Wrangler, but it was very difficult to go anywhere in it because of the fact that you couldn't fit anything in it. Even though it was such a big vehicle, It was a reverse TARDIS, which
that's exactly right.
Yeah, I just found completely bizarre. It was, you could fill it up, because I went from the old Ford Maverick, which had virtually a black hole in the back. You could just put in the entire house. And there was always a little bit of room at the top that you could put that, a couple of extra things in there. The Wrangler, which, I don't know, might have been a little bit smaller, but there was virtually no room. Like, it was very little usable room to be able to go. And when you want to go camping, that was a massive issue.
I know, and that's why I don't recommend a Wrangler for people who want to take for you're off camping. I just don't think it's got the space. You end up having to put roof racks on it and this, that, and the other, and it's just not happening. If you're turvy, then it's fine. And look at how much it can tow. It can't tow, and the payload's really not that much great. So even if you could fit a lot of stuff in it, then you don't have to payload to be able to do it. So that's what I mean by the fact that there simply isn't the payload to go with the car.
And now, I didn't know about a new Defender. So what's the story? Because I thought they ended the Defender.
Well, they did end the Defender, and that is definitely dead now. There are rumours it might live on in India or something like that, and it's a possibility. But it's dead because, for all the reasons, really, it was massively expensive to produce. Sales were too low. It was $25,000 a year, and that's very low for a modern car. It couldn't be updated to be safer, etc., etc. So it had to die. Sad but true. But Land Rover have stated that they want to have 3 model lines. They want to have the Defender range for the utilitarian, the Discovery range for, I guess, sort of family utilitarian, family cars, and the Range Rover for the upmarket. That's the 3 lines, and I want to have 3 vehicles in each. So it's coming back. Now, here is the thing. Is it going to come back as a serious off-road vehicle suitable for overlanding, touring, and working, or is it going to be a capable four-wheel drive vehicle, but you're better off just sticking your surfboards in it and looking cool at Bondi Beach. I'm really hoping it's going to be the sort of the serious vehicle, that it's not going to be insanely electronic and, if one thing fails and it's all over Red Rover. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm hoping it's going to have a really good payload. I'm hoping that the wagon will have a payload of at least a ton and it can tow 3.5 tons with ease. But, yeah, the DC100 concept that they brought out a while ago was not hopeful for me. It was way too soft and, it just wasn't happening. But I don't know. Let's see what happens. If Land Rover decide to go down the sort of recreational soft path, I just hope they don't call it a Defender. I hope they just come up with some other name for it. And as and when that they do decide to do a serious off-road workhorse vehicle, then they can bring the Defender out for that.
It would be sad. The Defender is it's a pretty special thing. I quite like the Defender. I could have quite easily... The thing I didn't like about it was very sort of agricultural inside.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for a premium experience, but I was looking for a few more bits and pieces than it did have inside.
Yeah, look, and there wasn't enough space to be able to do all of that stuff. They couldn't easily add airbags to it, even, and the chassis wasn't going to be crashworthy anywhere near 5-star. So, it simply couldn't be developed into a modern car. You'd have to start from scratch, which is pretty much what they've done there. And it's a crying shame because it's such a charismatic and capable car. I owned one for 9 years, and let me tell you that the tougher the situation you got into, the better that car was. And it was a fun car to drive on road. It was full of charisma. There will never be another car like it. Never, never, ever. And the prices of the last ones to be sold have just shut up. It's incredible how much they're worth now, and rightly so. It's one of the all-time classics. We will not see its like again.
Awesome. Well, that's probably a good place to end it. Thank you very much. It's good to catch up and start thinking about what new vehicles are going to be coming out and what I should upgrade to next, maybe. I think
come on, you've only just got the BT50. What can you be thinking of next?
Well, I am thinking about the Ute. I'm very keen to see what the specs are like on it because the BT50 will be due for a replacement, I think, probably in 12 months' time. So, that's what we're thinking. But I want to wait and see.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll have to have a conversation about that because there's a heap of new four-wheel drives coming out there, and I think that some of the wagons might be getting a bit of an uplift as well. Ford already starting to uplift the Ranger PX2, even though that's relatively new, and I'm sure that they'll throw a bit of money at the Everest as well because that hasn't quite taken off to be the Prado killer everyone they hoped it was going to be. So we'll see what happens then.
It is interesting times. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Robert, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Will do. Thanks so much, James.
Cheers, mate. Bye. Haha, and you can always rely on Robert to have something a little controversial to say. But I think that one of the trends that we're seeing is that some of the old great four-wheel drives, like, the Patrol 4.2, they're really starting to retain their value as four-wheel drivers realise that, they don't build them like they used to. So it will be interesting to see how four-wheel drive manufacturers respond to these changes, and if we can get a couple of vehicles that we would classify as real four-wheel drives to be made in the future. So I hope you learned something out of this one, and hopefully I'll see you on the tracks sometime soon. Bye.
4x4earth.com is used by over 200,000 people every month to find great tracks, organise trips, and find out how to better enjoy exploring the great outdoors. There's over 1,000 tracks and 300 campsites ready for you to explore. So check out 4x4earth.com today and sign up to get access to the track information, ask questions, and meet other 4x4 Earthers. Membership is completely free. If you're looking for a good route, check out 4x4earth.com today.